They say the screams will be heard for miles. Summer 1462. You're an Ottoman soldier inside thy most effective army on earth. You've conquered Constantinople. You've toppled empires. You're marching into a tinny principality referred to as Wallachia to crush a revolt prince. It ought to take weeks, perhaps days. Then you smell it. Death, rot, something else you cannot pretty name. Your column slows, the scouts have stopped shifting, and as you round the hill near the capital metropolis, you see it. A woodland. But the trees, they're now not trees, they're human beings. 20,000 of them. Your brothers, your comrades, lifted into the air on wood stakes, organized in ideal geometric rows as far as the attention can see. Some have been useless for weeks. There are bodies bloated and black. Others are nonetheless transferring, still respiration, nonetheless screaming. Your sultan, the person who conquered the Byzantine Empire, takes one look and turns his entire military round. What type of thoughts create something like this? And here's the part that should terrify you. This wasn't madness. It turned into strategy. Cold, calculated, and horrifyingly powerful. The tale you observed, you know, about Vlad the Impaler, it's a lie. Not because it didn't appear, but because the truth is a lot worse. This is the whole account of ways one guy, weaponized Ottoman, suffering so effectively that it modified the direction of empires. And by using the end, you'll apprehend why the real horror wasn't what he did to our bodies. It become Waith did to minds. Let's begin with a question no person asks. What breaks a person so completely that they turn out to be able to this? The year is 1442. Vlad is 11 years vintage. His father, Vlad Dracula, Vlad the Dragon, has just made a cope with these. Not a metaphorical one, an actual one, with a name. Sultan Murad II of the Ottoman Empire. The deal is simple. Vlad II gets to maintain his throne in Wallachia. In trade, he arms over his youngest sons as hostages. Insurance living collateral to guarantee his loyalty. So, young Vlad and his brother Radu are torn from their domestic and brought into the heart of the Ottoman Empire. Not as prisoners in dungeons, however, as guests in the palace at Edorn, and later their Egevan fine garments, training, navy training. They're taught Turkish, Arabic, philosophy, and the Quran. On the surface, it looks as if privilege. But here's what the records books gloss over. This WASN single quotes to deuse a TI. On it become mental warfare. Vlad spent his adolescence, 11 to 17, looking his captaseed, the artwork of empire constructing. He studied how the Ottomans used fear as a governing device. He witnessed public executions designed now not simply to punish, however to traumatize complete populations into submission. He learned that terror, when applied with surgical precision, changed into extra powerful than any navy. And he learned something else. He changed into entirely powerless. While his younger brother Radu adapted, even forming a near friendship with the Sultan's son, Mehmed. Vlad refused to bend. According to Ottoman courtroom information, he was regularly punished for his defiance. Some debt's advocate he turned into overwhelmed, in all likelihood tortured. The genuine information are lost to history. But what is positive is that something fundamental broke interior him throughout those years. Or perhaps extra appropriately. Something crystallized. He developed what present-day psychologists would possibly call a persecution complex, combined with an obsessive need for manage. But he channeled it. Every punishment he persevered, he studied. Every torture approach he witnessed, he memorized. He turned into building a mental arsenal, peace. In 1448, after 6 years of captivity, Vlad ultimately again to Wallachia, he changed into 17 years vintage. 2 months later, his father became assassinated by means of rival boyars. The V aristocratio played both aspects among the Ottomans and Hungarians. His older brother Mircea turned into buried alive. Vlad changed into by myself, surrounded with the aid of enemies, subsidized with the aid of nobody. And right here's wherein the tale received. He didn't just want revenge. He desired to remake the sector inside the photo of his trauma. He might take everything the Ottomans had taught him, approximately terror, and refine it into something they'd by no means visibilia than. But first, he had to wait. For 6 extra years, Vlad lived in exile, plotting, planning, studying navy techniques and political manving. And in 1456, with Hungarian backing, he sooner or later seized the Wallachian throne. The monster became about to be born. If you're fascinated by the documented psychological halbering factors that created records his most infamous figures, hit subscribe. We're just getting started out with how this broken boy became something far worse than his captors ever imagined. Vlad's coronation ceremonial dinner in 1456 need to had been a party. Instead, it became the blueprint for everything that followed. He invited the Bojar families, the identical nobility who had orchestrated his father's murder and buried his brother alive. Hundreds of them arrived in their greatest garments, believing they have been there to pledge loyalty to a brand new prince. The tremendous hall turned into embellished. Wine flowed freely. Then, within the middle of the feast, Vlad stood up and requested a easy query. How many Princess of Wallachia have you ever lived through? The older Bojars proudly answered. Some claimed to echo 12 specific rulers. They were bragging about their survival, their political savvy, their capacity to outlast any prince who sat at the throne. Vlad smiled. Then he gave an order. Every Bojar who had responded became arrested immediately. But here's where you see the methodical mind at work. He didn't execute them. Not yet. Instead, he separated them into 2 companies based on age and health. The older ones, architects of his own family's destruction. They have been impaled immediately outside the palace walls, not quick. The stakes have been cautiously inserted to avoid essential organs, making sure they could die slowly, over hours or days. Their screams supplied the soundtrack for what got here subsequent. The younger, stronger boyars and their households have been stripped of their noble garments and pressure-marched 50 miles north to the ruins of Panari Castle. They have been given a preference that wasn't absolutely a desire. Rebuild the fortress with their bare palms or die. For months, they hauled stones up the mountainside. They worked until their fingers bled, till their exceptional garments rotted off their bodies, until they collapsed from exhaustion. Most died all through the construction. The survivors, they have been never same. Vlad had effectively erased the antique, the aristocracy, and replaced them with a brand new class who owed entirety to him and lived in absolute terror of his displeasure. This wasn't just revenge. It was a systematic dismantling of the energy structure that had made Wallachia vulnerable, and it discovered something important about Vlad's psychology. He did not just need obedience. He desired to interrupt humans so absolutely that obedience had become their most effective viable reaction. But this became still home politics. The boyars were Wallachia. What Vlad did next could ship shockwaves across empires. In 1459, Sultan Mehmed II, sure, the identical Mehmed, who have been Vlad's youth partner, sent envoys to Wallachia, disturbing the once-a-year tribute that Vlad's father had agreed to pay. The demand came with an additional insult. Vlad became to present himself for my part in Constantinople, to renew his oath of vassallage. The envoys arrived, watching for the standard political theatre. Perhaps a few negotiation, perhaps a what they were given changed into a preview of hell when they entered Vlad's court docket and refused to eliminate their turbans. An actual religious custom in Ottoman protocol. Vlad asked them to give an explanation for their way of life. They did, like a leer-leaved, that he appeared inquisitive about know-how, as opposed to indignant. Vlad nodded thoughtfully. Then he said something that should have frozen their blood. I respect a man who honors his faith so, absolutely. Let me assist you honor it for all time. He ordered his guards to nail the turbans without delay to their skulls. Think approximately the precision of that cruelty. He didn't kill them. He mutilated them in a way that became each symbolically loaded and medically calculated to make certain they'd live to tell the tale, the adventure back to Constantinople. They had been walking messages, their screams echoing throughout the countryside as they fled again to the Sultan. When Mehmed acquired his envoys, those guys he'd sent in exact faith, now completely disfigured and driven one-half mad by means of pain. He understood at once. This wasn't the youth pal he remembered. This became something new, something that had taken the Ottoman training in terror and developed them into something even the Ottoman Shadan imagined. War was now inevitable, but earlier than that struggle got here, Vlad had greater messages to ship. Here's what most human beings do. Note apprehend approximately. It wasn't simply execution, it turned into engineering. The not unusual picture, a stake pushed instantly through the torso, could kill nearly instantly. That defeats the entire purpose. Vlad's technique turned into a long way extra sophisticated and infinitely greater cruel. Based on modern medical analyses of the descriptions and surviving Ottoman deaths, here's how it's since. First, the victim changed into laid face down. The stake, carefully decided on, rounded on the tip and punctiliously oiled, changed into inserted through the. But here's the vital element. It became inserted at an aspective specially designed to. In some documented cases, the stake could, in the end, emerge through the shoulder or chest, but the victim ought to continue to be alive for up to 3 days. Why this approach? Because Vlad understood something that cutting-edge psychological struggle experts now verify. Witnessing extended suffering is exponentially more traumatizing than witnessing. A battlefield beheading is horrific but brief. Impalement changed into an overall performance that lasted days, whole with screams that might be heard throughout entire valleys. But the physical act was only one aspect. The actual genius, if we can use the sort of perverted phrase, changed into in the staging. When Vlad impaled sufferers, he did it in public squares, alongside principal roads, out of doors, metropolis gates, anywhere that would maximize visibility. He understood that word of mouth and rumor could multiply the mental effect some distance pass, the actual number of victims. One impalement witnessed by means of 100 human beings might create 100 storytellers, each of whom could tell 100 extra dot, and he delicated the symbolism constantly. Stakes were unique heights, primarily based on rank. Peasants close to the ground, nobles higher, the highest reserved for enemy commanders. This created a grotesque visual hierarchy that strengthened his message. Everyone has a place in my world, and everybody will suffer in line with their station. In a Fumini ode, he organized impaled victims in geometric patterns, circles, stars, concentric jewelry. This wasn't random sadism. It'd become an indication of control. It stated, "I actually have a lot power that I can turn human struggling into art." There's a German pamphlet from 1462. Admittedly, propaganda, but based in eyewitness money owed from Saxon merchants in Wallachia, that describes Vlad eating most of the impaled. He allegedly had a table set up within the middle Ophir area of steaks, ate his meals surrounded by means of demise, men, and seemed to experience the revel in whether this specific incident, passed off precisely as described as controversial. But what is no longer controversial is the mental message. I am to date beyond your knowledge of human conduct that your horror does not contact me. The Saxons, who had their personnel complex relationship with Vlad, circulated these pamphlets extensively. They had been some of the primary mass-produced horror testimonies in European history. Complete with woodcut illustrations, these pics, crude however effective, unfold throughout Europe and cemented Vlad's reputation. But here's the query nobody changed into asking. Was any of this operating? Was terror surely an powerful navy method? Or became Vlad only under cowl of darkness? They infiltrated the massive Ottoman camp with one objective: kill the Sultan. Contemporary money ode describe absolute chaos. The Wallachians were dressed in captured Ottoman uniforms and new sufficient Turkish takars, confusion. They set hearth to tents, stampeded horses, and especially focused the section off camp wherein the Sultan's pavilion stood. They came within yards of Mehmed himself. Some historians believe Vlad and the Sultan had been in brief, invisible touch throughout the burning, but the Janissaries held, forming a defensive circle around their chief. After hours of close-quarters combat, Vlad realized he couldn't spoil through. He ordered a retreat, and his guys vanished again into the night as all at once as they'd regarded. The Ottoman casualties had been fantastically mild. Maybe 2,000 killed, even though Ottoman resource downplayed the numbers. But the mental harm was catastrophic. The Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, within the center of his personal military, had nearly been killed through a vastly unnumbered enemy, who struck from nowhere and disappeared like ghosts. Mehmed's commanders were rattled, his squaddies were exhausted, and that they were nevertheless weeks far from Constantinople, marching via a useless panorama where each shadow may hide an enemy. Then they reached the capital, and that they saw what Vlad were getting ready for him. No written description can completely seize what Mehmed's military encountered at the approached 2. Targoviste in overdue June 1462, but we will attempt. Imagine you're an Ottoman soldier. You've been marching for weeks via scorched earth. You're hungry, exhausted, and jumpy from steady nighttime raids. You haven't visible the enemy in. They've just vanished. That have to be an amazing signal. It seems like an enticed. As you approach the Wallachian capital, pheasant hits first. If you have ever smelled a lifeless animal rotting in summertime warmth, multiply that through lots, then add the sweet, sick-making odor of decomposing human flesh. It's so thick, you may flavor it. Then you spot the stakes at the primary one. Then 10, then 100. Then you comprehend there's no give up. They stretch to the horizon in each course. Contemporary archons say the sphere of impaled bodies, prolonged for almost 2 miles in duration and over 1/2 amila in width. Modern historians debate the precise, wide variety. Ottoman assets, likely minimizing for propaganda motives, claim 10,000. Wallachian and Hungarian sources claim up to 20. Something he did not absolutely recognize. Thoughts that had taken Ottoman techniques and evolved them into something even the Ottomans couldn't shape. The navy situation become already deteriorating. Supply lines have been overstretched. The scorched earth approaches had labored. The nighttime raids had destroyed morale. The Sultan's own commanders were advising retreat. But the forest of the Impaled was the mental breaking point. It proved that traditional navy questioning failed to follow right here. Vlad wasn't seeking to win battles. He turned into trying to interrupt mines, and it was operating. Within days, Mehmed ordered a general retreat. He left a contingent below Vlad's more youthful brother, Radu to Mandane, harassing Vlad. But the Sultan himself withdrew with the principal army. The most powerful military force within the world had invaded a tiny principality with overwhelming Byzantine been turned back. Not by using military defeat, however, by means of sheer psychological battle. Vlad the Impaler had received, but the tale would not cease there, due to the fact what comes subsequent reveals, Thelist tragedy, that terror, but effective in the short time period, always devours its wielder ultimately. You'd think that turning again the Ottoman Empire would make Vlad a hero in Christian Europe. In some methods it did. The Hungarian king and the Pope praised his defense of Christendom. But here's what they failed to recognize. Vlad could not turn it off. The methods that defeated the Ottomans didn't forestall with the Ottomans. He used them on a very by past due 1462. Vlad was impaling Wallachian traders for charge gouging. He was impaling boyars suspected of disloyalty based totally on rumors. He'd become impaling entire villages for minor infractions. The device he'd solid to defeat a advanced enemy had end up his most effective tool for the whole thing. His political role deteriorated unexpectedly. His brother Radu, subsidized by Ottoman gold and Jews, placed himself as the sane alternative. Hungarian support evaporated as Vlad's increasingly more erratic conduct alienated his allies. By November 1462, simply months after Hispa's triumph, Vlad turned into forced to flee into Hungarian territory, and here's the bitter irony. He became imprisoned via his meant ally, King Marius Corvinus of Hungary, on costs that stay murky to this day. Some resources say Matthias fabricated letters to make Vlad appear like he turned into negotiating with the Ottomans. Others suggest Vlad had emerged as the sort of legal responsibility that even his Christian allies desired him long past. The forest of the Impaled wasn't insanity. It became implemented psychology. The night assaults were not random violence. They had been precision navy method. Every impalement, every mutilation, every public show of suffering was a calculated flow in a bigger recreation. And here's what have to preserve you conscious at night time. It worked. Against not possible odds, the usage of not anything but calculated terror, Vlad turned again, and he proved that worry, well weaponized, should accomplish what armies couldn't. The question isn't whether or not Vlad was evil. That's apparent. The query is, what does it say approximately in nature that this method changed into so effective? And what different calculated horrors are hiding and records his shadows, ready to train us training weed instead now not examine? If you need to, hold uncovering the uncomfortable truths that textbooks bury. Subscribe. Because history's darkest chapters aren't just about what happened. They're approximate led, why it worked, and it is the understanding we can't manage to pay for to forget.